Lancey Lee, welcome to the Tokyo Living Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sal.
And thank you very much for hosting me on your show last week. If viewers and listeners haven't already, check out the relevant platforms for that. We'll put links in the show notes. But I was honored to be on Lance's show, and we had a lot of fun sort of talking about my background and my story in Japan. But today it's all about Lance. On the show we like to talk about all things sport and the positive benefits and influences that sport can have on people's lives. So looking forward to touching on all the great work you've done with the ICANN Gymnastics program. But there's obviously a lot more to the Lancey Lee story than that. You've been out in Tokyo for the best part of half a century and achieved some amazing things in that time, including being president of the Tokyo American Club, as well as president of the American Chamber of Commerce down here in Japan. But perhaps we sort of start at the start and tell the sort of viewers and listeners, whereabouts did you grow up and what made you come out to Japan?
Well, actually, I grew up in Los Angeles, and the reason why I came to Japan is because I was drafted.
Right.
It was during Vietnam, so I was drafted unwillingly. I had 1 year in college and had to drop college to go into the draft. And then while I was in the service, I was only stationed outside of the continental United States. Well, actually, I was stationed in Puerto Rico. And then I felt, since I'd spent time in the service and I hadn't gone anywhere outside, let me put in for Vietnam. I did, but they said they couldn't give me Vietnam, but they could give me Japan, and that's how I ended up in Japan. And
Wow. And what year was that?
that was in 1974. It was just as we were being overrun in Vietnam, and you saw those pictures of helicopters being pushed off of ships and people trying to pile up on any way they could get out of Vietnam, they were trying to get out. So that's the time I was trying to go in. Yeah, they had the requirements, but I could go to Japan, and I came here, and I was happy I did.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to Vietnam, but I figured that was my only way outside of the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
And how long did you serve for when you arrived in Japan?
I had to extend so that I could stay for 2 years. And after that 2 years, it was the end of my service. They actually wanted me to stay in longer to go to officers training school. And I convinced them that I just wanted 1 year in civilian life to see what it would be like.
Okay.
And after that, I would reconsider. So they obliged me and said, sure. But to be honest, I had no intentions of coming back in the service.
Really? Yeah.
And when I was discharged in California, I immediately turned around and came back to Japan.
Okay.
I was working with an investment company, and that was a quite interesting ride because I learned what to do with money. Should I ever get any? That was the only thing working with them. And from there, it led me to the American school, where I ended up being PE teacher there for 3 years. And then I formed IGC. And that's when I started on my journey in teaching children confidence through gymnastic skills.
Yeah. So what sort of period of time was that when you were at ASIJ?
Well, actually, I got out of the service in 1976. So from 74 to 76, I was stationed in the Air Force at Yokota Air Force Base.
Yep.
Then I got out, stayed with the investment company for 1 more year, and then I got a job at the American School from 1977 to 1980. So I was a physical education teacher there for those 3 years.
Yeah.
And then I formed my own company, and then I started working at schools. I worked at Sacred Heart. I worked at Alba International, but I was contract. So it was a little bit different than being a full-time teacher. It was actually better. So it was really good.
And what's your own athletic background? Did you practice gymnastics growing up?
I was a competitive gymnast from high school, 4 years in high school, 1 year in college, even with my height, but I didn't get my height until actually I got out of high school. I was about 5'9", 5'10".
Oh, really?
Yes. And then I got another inch or an inch and a half on good days once I got into college. So I was competitive. First year I did all around. I competed on all the pieces of equipment. And then I realized my upper body was getting too big and my lower body wasn't. So I looked like that character Foghorn in Looney Tunes, the big upper body and little thin duck legs. So
Yep.
that's what I look like. So I decided to restrict myself to just floor and tumbling, floor exercise and tumbling. So that's how I competed all the way through. So it's
Yeah.
always a surprise to people to see me. First of all, being of color, you didn't have many people of color that were gymnasts at that time.
Mm.
So it was very interesting to find that most people didn't believe I was a gymnast. They thought I
Yeah.
was either football or basketball,
Yeah, sure.
and I loved
Yeah.
it. It
Yeah.
was fantastic. Yeah.
And then when you were at, ASOJ, you were working as a full-time PE teacher
Yeah.
and yeah, yep. And
And they allowed me, but there was one interesting thing. They allowed me to run my gymnastics program. That was one of the conditions. I
right,
could have a
okay.
gymnastics program after school. That was a condition for me to agree to be a PE teacher there.
Yep.
And we allowed that to happen. And it was unreal. I have to say that my last year, my last year there, I really believe I was making more income than the headmaster through my program and just being a PE teacher because I had an agreement that every year we'd renegotiate my contract.
Right, okay.
And we did that. And that's what I learned from being an investment consultant. So
Yeah.
we did that. And then when I taught at Sacred Heart, when I taught at Aoba, they had a non-disclosure agreement because of the amount of money I was being paid. They didn't want the teachers to know.
Mhm.
I just came in to do what I did. And I stopped being a PE teacher and started becoming a motor coordination specialist.
Okay.
So it changed things quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
yeah, go on.
yeah, I was gonna say, so that's, yeah, 42 years since you left the school, and did all your, boys go through ASIJ as well, or,
No, no, no. My youngest went to ASIJ nursery kindergarten, and then I took him out and I put 3 of my sons in the British school,
okay,
and I had them there for a couple of years. Then from there, I had them homeschooled for about a year. It's very unorthodox the way I had my kids educated. Then I had them homeschooled, and because my mentor at the time had his kids homeschooled, and I realized how mature they were and how much information they had.
mm,
And it was cheap too. It was inexpensive. So I brought a girl from England over here, got an apartment in Shibuya, had her work with my 3 sons at the time. My youngest was too young to be in school, and she taught them every day, and sometimes she babysit for us as well,
yeah,
and overall, it was really inexpensive, and we did that for about a year and a half, and then my wife felt that they weren't learning to be as social as they should be.
mm,
She really wanted them to go back to school. So I suggested, let's put them in Japanese school.
mm,
S- They're just as Japanese as they are American. And when Japanese people really become Japanese is through elementary school. That's when they actually understand what it's like to be Japanese.
yeah,
So my kids went through that up until I think they had 1 year in junior high school. Then I took them out and put them back in international school, but they went to international school in Yokohama
okay, yep,
because I felt that was a little more to the likings of what I'd become accustomed to after living here for so long.
yeah,
It was
sure,
more, it wasn't so fixed on one way. It's like they were more used to dealing with world situations and not
yep,
just one situation. So that's why I had them in Yokohama.
yeah, interesting,
Worked out very well for my sons.
yeah, yeah. And do you have anything to do with, the ASIJ now? Do you ever sort of go back and see the school? Have you
As a matter of fact, I still have a program at the nursery kindergarten,
yes,
the one in
yeah,
Pampanga. So
yeah,
I've never broken my ties with the SIJ. I
mm,
mean, they're very close to my heart. I mean, I attribute a lot to what I've done based upon being a teacher at the American school because of all the other teachers I got to meet and who I interacted with. Many of them aren't there any longer, but
mhm,
many of them I still have a very strong connection with. So
yeah,
a big part. As a matter of fact, there's a family called the Toteros, Vince and Sue Totero, who actually helped me form my first gymnastics company,
okay,
including the logo. I created the logo, but it was actually she was going to do it, but I couldn't let her do it. So I did it. And we were supposed to bring it over the weekend, and she didn't have time to do it. And I said, it didn't matter because we're going to use the one I came up with.
right,
And no, I'm still very close with them. So there's a lot of people I'm close with that are still, some are still here in Japan. So
yeah,
it's a very very impressionable, important time of my life was working at the exhibition.
Yeah.
So about
And then how did you go about, sort of going out on your obviously, you'd sort of built, the gymnastics program within the school, so you had sort of the foundations there. Well, where did you go from there?
well, from there, I actually, like I said, I started to contract myself with other international schools.
Mm,
I did that. And then during that time, I was dating my wife, and she was a medical student at the time. And I thought, once she finished medical school and became a doctor, it seemed kind of awkward, even though I was doing okay financially. She's married to a PE teacher, and she's a doctor. So I thought, what could I do that would seem to make sense of us being together on a business level? So that's when I got involved with CT scanners, buying used medical equipment. I
okay.
was actually going to start off by starting off with building a catalog on medical apparatus like artificial arms so people could learn how to use a syringe and stuff like that.
Mm,
Nurses and doctors could do that. And I was building up the catalog when one of the parents of one of the kids I was working with in my program came to me and introduced the scanner business to me. Well, we became partners. A year after we started, 2 years after we started, I bought them out. There were 3 of us, 4 of us. I bought them out and I controlled the whole company. So I had the company for 10 years
wow.
before, I stopped doing that business. But, it was very lucrative for me
Okay.
because at the beginning, to go and take out a scanner, they were paying to have them thrown away. And when I first started, for the first 2 to 3 years of doing the business, I was being paid to take out the scanners, and I would charge them less than they'd have to pay if they dealt with someone else.
Mm,
Then after a while, they got wind of how much was involved in the scanner business,
right.
and then they had to start paying for it, but it was still minimal compared to what we made in the resale of the shoes. And this was all
Mm,
during the bubble, so it was very lucrative for us.
yeah, yeah. And so were you, were still coaching, on the side during that time?
Well, actually, I had a staff of about 28 instructors,
Really? Oh,
and I
wow.
had oh, yes, and I had over, I think, about 4 or 500 children in our program. But I wasn't teaching any longer, but I would come in. And that was one thing that made me realize how much I really cared about doing the program, because I would come in sometimes and people would start wondering who I was.
Yeah,
And the kids weren't yelling Mr. Lee anymore. I was just a stranger. And that didn't feel good because
really, yeah.
I always enjoyed the pureness of dealing with children. They have no facades. They tell you exactly how they feel in one way or the other.
Mm,
And that's always helped to keep me humble. No matter what I did, they could care less. What am I doing to enhance their existence here?
y
So I missed that, and I didn't realize it until after I was away for a while, and I'd come back, and they really didn't know what it was. And it also, to add insult to injury, when the parents would look at me like, "Who's this guy in here?" None of these kids look like they belong to him. So that I was happy to get back into it. I was
yeah,
really happy to get back into it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you build up the staff? Was it, yeah,
It
primarily
wasn't me. It wasn't me who built them up. It was the
okay,
president I had of the company, and her name is Hiroko.
okay.
Hiroko was my president at the time, and she built up the staff because she's from a physical education college.
Mm,
So she was bringing in instructors from there, and we had a very good staff. They
yeah,
came in, and I would help to interview them, but it was her show. So
yep,
she would, and people thought I worked for her.
right, yeah,
Every now and then when I did help, parents would think they would praise her on how nice it was for her to have this one instructor who was really good with the kids, and they were talking about me. And that would surprise me, but I would never dispute it. I just let it go
yeah,
on the way it was because I didn't wanna be having to do that all the time.
yeah,
Because I had scanner deals and I never knew when I was gonna have to go because this wasn't something you could schedule when
mhm,
the scanner come out. So it could be a moment's notice and I'd have to leave. So
sure, yeah.
it was good to have
And
somebody.
yeah, and so I guess, you would have wanted the instructors to, coach and sort of mentor the kids in a certain way. Were you sort of instructing her on how you want the coaches to be trained, and what were some of the main things that you were trying to instill in the coaches, and what are the main sort of things that you were trying to get across in your coaching?
That's a good point because I would have instructor meetings. So the
Mm,
instructor knew who I was
mm,
and I would speak to them, but a lot of them, well, for all of them, English was not their first language. So the
mm,
nuances they couldn't get. And I didn't have the ability to get that across. So I always felt there was always a disconnect between what I really wanted and what they were able to offer just because they couldn't understand the small nuances that go along with any language.
mm.
So it'd be the same a foreigner coming over here with a different language trying to teach Japanese kids in a way that would make them really functionable in Japan.
Yeah.
I was trying to prepare our kids for a world audience.
Mhm.
It, it wasn't coming across the way I wanted, but and again, I felt bad about this, but I couldn't do both.
Sure.
So instead of trying to be so strict about it being the way I thought it should be, I would let it go sometimes
Mm.
just so that I could continue to bring in business from the scanner business.
Yeah, sure,
Because a
sure.
lot of times, and then I had a gymnastics team too. And there was no way we would be able to charge the parents the amount of money it would cost for me to rent the gyms to keep a gymnastics team. So I was funding it.
Okay.
So a lot of money just to keep the program going,
Mm, mm.
but
Yeah,
that was my heart. The scanner business was good because it created capital, but it
yeah,
didn't give me a fulfilling feeling that I was really making a difference in someone's life.
yeah,
But
yeah.
gymnastics did. And like to go on a little bit further, when I finally did start to trim it down and get involved again and get my sons involved, because I knew it'd be a good training, training environment for them to understand how to deal with other human beings.
Yep.
So I made it mandatory that all of my sons taught with me. And to
Right.
be honest, that was the best time in my life. I mean, talking about ah, a bond.
Mm.
They'd already bonded with each other, and I think that was during their homeschooling.
Yep.
But with me, when they had to teach with me every single weekend,
Yeah.
it wasn't by choice. I said, if I were a fisherman, I said, you picked me. I did not pick you. You had a 1 in a 300 millionth of a chance of being my child. Everyone that understands biology understands what I'm saying. So I said, you picked me. I didn't pick you. If I were a fisherman, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Mhm.
And I said, I'm a gymnast and I have a program. You guys are going to learn how to teach and work with other people and explain to their parents when they come to you asking how their child is. And I think all that was just a fine, it was just a phenomenal learning experience for my sons. I can't think of a better way to teach them how to deal with people than to have them do that
Yeah, yeah.
all over the world.
That's
And
yeah.
it was really good. And it bonded us together as well.
Yeah. I so with my kids karate program, and I think that's actually the first time we met was probably 10 years ago at ASIJ when they were running like a after school activity like training session just on sort of logistics things and that with all the coaches.
Right.
But I can remember you talking about your program and focusing more on sort of the confidence aspect rather than the actual skills associated with gymnastics. One of the other coaches who I know quite well sort of joked and said, "Yeah, some of my kids actually became overconfident through Lance's program." I always remember that was a good comment. No, but within my karate program, so I sort of when I started off teaching in Tokyo, one of my first patients when I was working at Tokyo Physio in early 2005 turned out to be a principal of K-Space International School. And so
Sure.
we were just chatting, and I said, yeah, I came out to Japan for karate, and she goes, "Oh, do you teach? Do you teach kids?" It's like, yeah, and she said, how young? And it's like, "Oh, I've taught kids, from about 8." And she's like, "Oh, no, I need someone who can teach kids at like 3 or 4 or 5." And it's like, could try. And so, yeah, I taught at K-Space for probably, or basically the whole time I was at Tokyo Physio. So that would have been 7 years. And then I sort of branched out and started teaching at the Early Learning Center, and then also at Nishimachi. Uh,
Sam, Sam, let me ask you a question. When you started teaching those 3-year-olds, did you find that it's a fine line between babysitting and actually teaching?
yeah,
When you start teaching that young, when you're teaching children that young, you really have to have your best game going on because they are truly going to tell you the way they feel.
yeah, yeah,
And if you can't entertain them and keep them focused, buddy, it becomes a babysitting program, and you don't want to have that.
yeah. It's so the classes that I run at 360 on a Wednesday, I do a 3 and 4 year olds class, a 5 years and over for the sort of beginners to sort of the early intermediate, and then more sort of intermediate and advanced class. And you're right, it gets easier as the evening progresses, but that first class is really hard work. But what I was getting to, so both my sons are training at the moment. The younger one is 4.5. The older one will be 7 in a couple of days. And so the 4 year olds does the 3 and 4 year olds class, but because Max, the older one, is there anyway, and he's got his orange belt, I've actually had him now as the assistant instructor. So we've got the kids sort of lined up, and then Max will actually stand out the front with me and go through the techniques, and then, help the kids. So when we're getting them to punch mitts and getting them to hold the mitts for each other, Max will sort of go around and help. And he loves it. He gives him sort of a sense of
But not as much as you do. Not as much as you do, though.
yeah, no, absolutely. I love seeing him do it.
I'm
Yeah,
like, yes, that's my boy.
yeah, yeah. So I definitely understand where you're coming from that perspective for sure. And so, did you start off all your kids in gymnastics fairly young then?
It was take one step, do a forward roll. Take one step, do a back handspring. No, they don't even remember when they started because that's all they've been doing.
Yeah,
They've
yeah,
been doing that from birth. Yes.
And do they still train? Do they?
No, they don't. They don't.
Yeah,
I, I, I don't know. I think that's the curse of having your own kids. When you want them, I think when they know you want them to do something,
yeah,
and I think I was the same way. My father wanted me to stay in the United States, and it really hurt him when I told him I was coming back to Japan.
yeah.
Just knew I was going to stay there. And I said, Dad, let me take. He knew I wasn't going to come back,
Mhm.
and I think that's. Had I been sharper, I would have pretended like I didn't want them to do it, and they'd still be doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never really pushed my kids, but
Right. No, no,
I
I don't
mean,
push them. I don't think I
yeah,
pushed. Just they know you don't have to. They can tell.
exactly.
They can
Yeah,
tell.
yeah. And my kids have gravitated towards. They're both obsessed with WWE, so they like that sort of combat environment, and so
Okay.
the karate comes very natural to them, and yeah, they love it. Although I was actually talking to Max, my oldest, because he's doing soccer and rugby, and he said, "Daddy, do you know what my favorite sport is?" And it's like, "Do I want to know?" And he's like, "It's soccer." Okay, that's fine. Daddy, do you know what my second favorite sport is? I don't know. What is it? Rugby. Okay, all right. You can stop beating me up now. I'm sure this is a problem of
You can stop. You can stop. Yeah.
uh,
Everything we teach them, right?
yeah. But yeah, so with your program then, did you sort of establish your goals with the program in terms of like, teaching the kids confidence and teaching those life values right from the start?
Well,
And
actually,
is that a reflection of the way that you were coached when you were young as well?
not at all. No. As a matter of fact, it's because I wasn't cooked like that that I thought, what could I do to help teach children to be as confident as possible so they could get these skills? Because first of all, I'm working with a very small window of time. The children that I get aren't going to be with me necessarily. They're expats. They have a 3 to 5 year window, period. And then it looks like they're starting all over again. So I have to get this information across to them as fast as possible and build them up as quick as possible. I remember there was one thing I used to do at the end of all my classes. I'd have the kids yell, I can. And there was this one guy that came to watch my program. And this is after I'd had it for about maybe 6, 7 years. He said, Mr. Lee, I love your program and I like what you're doing with the children. Why do you wait till the end to have them yell, I can? Why don't you start off the program with them saying I can and ending it with I can. And I thought, I mean, it was like, come on. I mean, I've been doing all this time and making such a big deal about them saying I can at the end and didn't do it at the beginning. So I started using that. I can came from a little girl by the name of Angie Bennett, who must be in her, I won't say, she's she's halfway to 100 years old. So when I taught her, and she would do one back handspring, she'd do several back handsprings if I spotted the first one. I made it a point one weekend to sit with her and work with her for a whole lot. It was 2 hours, spotting her and telling her she could do it. And she kept on telling me she couldn't. And it finally clicked. And I started using some of my training from an investment consultant, from different books that I read, like Think and Grow Rich, Is a Man Thinking, all these positive motivational books. And there's one thing I remember in one book that said, if you can get people to say yes enough, they'll automatically act before they think of no.
Yep.
So I told her to say, I can. She said, but I can't. I said, that's okay. Just say you can. Then I had her say it. I said, I had her say over and over. And then we did a back handspring. And I said, say it again. And then she did a back handspring. Then I said, this time I'm not going to spot you, but say I can. And she said it. She did a back hand, kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to use that from now on. That's where the I can came from.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I learned, saying is one thing, but vibrating it is another. The children won't believe it or feel it if you don't. It's just like in karate. When you're hitting the makiwara or whatever, if you don't center just right and put your full force in it, you'll break your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use, like they call it chi, same thing with building that same belief system. It comes out and the kids feel it and you can give it to them. Giving it to them is not hard. Having them maintain it. And the problem I find all the time is they're with you for a few minutes. Okay. Even if they're in an hour, they get about 10 minutes with you in a class. Let's say you have 20 kids in the class. Each child gets at most 10 minutes of your time. All right. How much time are they spending with everybody else telling them they can't do it?
Mm-hmm.
The next week, because it's usually once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have them every day, who are they listening to the other 24 hours? That's the hard part. And that's why I made sure the parents came and watched us once every 4 weeks. So I would be talking to them, but they thought I was talking to their kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd be talking to the parents because that would be the issue.
Yeah.
I want to make sure they keep it. But luckily, we live in an environment with these expats that most of them already had the attitude, or they wouldn't even be here.
That's true.
They couldn't be here. So we're very fortunate that way. But every now and then, if you creep through, it really they maintain a different attitude. And then this is one example. One person came up to me once, and this is literally how they came up to me. They said, Mr. Lee, why is my child so lethargic? So, I mean, that's what you're dealing with sometimes, but very rare. It's very rare. And it's easy to change because they're in an environment where people are so energized and so ready to take on the next challenge.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be too much, but that's the case. So,
Yeah.
and my program isn't really a gymnastics program, and I've veered away from that. I use it as a vehicle. When people do come here and they're only interested in gymnastics and on a competitive level, I referred so many kids to you. It's a shame. And other people, because that's not what I teach.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
The kids will get the skills. There's no
Yeah.
way you can't be confident and not get a back handspring, not get a forward roll, not get a hit stand. But I don't put it together and give them a routine.
Yeah.
They need to go to a club that does that. And they need to do it more than once a week if they really want to be good at it. And that's for anything.
Of course. Yeah. And I've done that with some of my students as well. If they want to get serious into it.
You have to be there. And I tell the parents, it's a commitment. You're going to have to take them to each place they're going to have to go. Or they're going to have to go often.
Yeah. And the
chair. Go on.
Yeah. No, I mean, the expat, the sort of 3 to 5 years is such a challenge. Like I actually posted on my Instagram a couple of days ago a sort of collage of the last group of students I had get their new belts. And then in the middle of that collage, I just had a picture of the belts, 2 belts by themselves, which were green belts, which was the highest belt through the, with that group of kids that went through in the last grading last month. That didn't get their belts because they're basically the day after the grading, they relocated with their family to Germany. And these kids, yeah, these kids are taught for. I mean, they're 11 and 12 now. I started teaching them when they were like 7 and 8 or 6. Then
Yeah.
built them up, and they were just starting to get some momentum, going tournaments, have some success. And then with a couple of months' notice, it's like, oh, Sensei Sam, we're going to Germany in the summer.
And you go, I've gone to the parents many times and said, I'm sorry, you can't leave. Your kids, you can leave, but your kids have to stay with you. There's too much time in them.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let them go. I can't do it. Because you know what happened when I had a team too? You could lose half your team. And then when you start competing again, people think, who are these kids? You started with kids doing forward rolls again, and you had kids doing back handsprings on the beam. You had them doing doubles on the trampoline. And they leave, and then you start questioning yourself. Did I really teach these kids? Because look at this. Now what do I have? It is hard to always start over again.
And
You know, then you have these kids, and we were competing against Japanese kids.
well, that's the thing. Yeah, I was just going to say, a couple of weeks ago, I was refereeing at the our national championships, and the branch chefs are like, "Oh no, the Roppongi dojo still hasn't got any fighters in the nationals." It's like, you don't understand. Like, I get someone close to that level, and then they're gone.
Inevitably, yes.
Yeah,
Isn't that something?
it's tough. Yeah,
Hey, but it made me change my focus.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah,
and this also, I stopped teaching. I don't teach as young a I don't teach really young children anymore. I think our age range is now, because the director, she takes care of all of that. And I think it's age 6 to age 10, because I find that if they're too young, then it takes, I'm spending too much time at the beginning.
mm,
After I've had them for about a month, it's no problem.
yeah,
But I'm getting to the age where I'm not as anxious to do that anymore. So I want them to come in with, they understand what I'm saying right away.
yeah.
They come in at that age. And if I have them past 10, if they're my kids and I've had them from a certain period of time, I'll let them go on later. But if they're not and they're new to come in, it's too much baggage I have to deal with.
Yeah.
Because I'm a confidence building program. And if they come in with the wrong attitude, it's too late. I mean, not too late, but it's difficult to change that mindset if they're past 10
Yeah.
and they have a certain mindset about themselves. And there's some things you can't say either too when the kids come in and they're not physically capable.
Mm,
And that's an issue. And it's become very touchy in the Western world. You're not supposed to talk about it, but I do. I don't play
yeah.
until I go to the parents right away. And
How do you approach that? Yeah,
it's hard, but I go up to them and I'll say, it's hard to say it, but I'll say, the skills they're going to go through, if they don't take care of this vessel they have in the proper way, it's going to hurt them more than it's going to help them.
mm,
But it depends on, and I'm trying to read the parent as I'm talking to. And I said, our children do not represent our future. Our children represent our past. Because the one thing we can teach to them is what we've already learned. Now, on the other hand, what we represent to our children is their possible future. So we owe it to them, but most of all to ourselves, to be all we can be to show them what's possible. So
Mm.
if we don't take care of our bodies and our children grow up loving us, what do you think they're going to do?
yeah, yeah. That's that's
Take care of your body and they grow up loving you. What do you think they're going to do? So don't expect things of your children that you're not willing to do. Don't they're going to end up to feel really bitter towards you if you aren't practicing what you preach.
No, it's so true, so true.
So
No,
that
I love that message.
I got 4 boys that come to my house, come to my apartment all the time, and their mother can't wait to show how lean and mean they are and everything. That's the only reason why. That's the only reason why they fit, because they are just cut and lean and they don't even have to try.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for me.
And so, obviously, you're still very active with the program. How much coaching do you do at the moment?
Right now, our programs don't start until September. We're a little late
Yep.
this year. And we have about, from 300 children, we went down to almost like 30, which, to be honest, I really prefer that at my
Yeah.
age.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I can really give full attention to them. I don't have none of my classes are more than 10. Well, I should take it back. I think I have one that's maybe 12 kids or something like that.
No.
And in that hour's time, I can really give them attention and I really see the difference and I
Yeah.
enjoy it. I'm enjoying it too. It's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy doing it now. And I like the contact between them and I like their parents are so young. Their parents are younger than a lot of the
That's
their parents are younger than a lot of the people I taught when I taught at the American school.
yeah. Yeah.
These I taught are approaching their 60s almost.
Yeah. Well.
So, I mean, come on. And I remember one little girl in school, this is a little side note. When I was teacher at Sacred Heart, and I think she was about 15 years old, and I had to be about 28 or 29. And she said, "Mr. Lee, I wonder what you're gonna look like when you turn 80." And I said, "You know, when I turn 80, you'll be in your 60s. You know that?" She went, "Yeah, she's gonna age too."
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, which schools are you teaching at the moment? Are you still basing the programs out of schools?
And the same program, the same areas. We have the British school, we have DLC, we have Tokyo American Club. I'm trying to think now of the different locations, but that's where we have those
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if people watching and they would like to get their kids into the program,
Maybe very difficult because they're really hooked, and most of them are through the school, except for if they're members of the American Club, they can join them there, but it's still difficult. Most of our
yeah,
program a waiting list,
yeah, yeah,
and I really don't encourage too many people to come because they'll disappoint them, and I try to keep who I have
sure, sure,
because I can see the progression, and I tell the parents, when sign up starts, sign up right away
yeah,
because I built a rapport with their kids. And they understand, and with their parents as well. And that's what I'm doing. So it's like I said, I'm using gymnastics as a vehicle to build up their confidence.
yeah,
Right. And when I see that coming through, oh, it makes all the difference. And I've had some kids that had special needs, and that's some of the well, all of them are heart wrenching, but sometimes when the kids have challenges outside of just being a child, that touches me because one little boy went to his father and he was really on the spectrum. And I couldn't tell how he felt about it because I was very strict and I treat the children like it doesn't matter what spectrum they're on. I treat them all basically the same way. So there isn't a big difference. He went to his father and told him and cried to his father and said, "I want to stay with Mr. Lee." And it really shocked me because I thought I was being really strict with him.
mm, mm,
So active. And he wanted to stay there. I guess he could feel, like I said, that chi or feel that vibration. He knew it was done with love.
yeah, yeah,
I really cared about him, but he's going to have to do it this way, not the way he feels like
yeah.
it. And that's how he did it. It was beautiful.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I mean, Lance, it's great. Exactly the type of chat I was hoping to have to really get your energy and your passion for what you do across. And it's given me a little bit of inspiration to sort of rethink the way that I coach and see if I can just get a little bit more of that sort of a passion across with the kids that I work with. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we can chat again either on your platform and or mine, and yeah,
Yeah, because having you on was really a pleasure, Muse. So, but I could see that you were you seem like on my platform, you were controlling too much. I want to get a little bit deeper with you, Sam. I want to get a little bit closer. I want to ask you a few more questions to get in there so people really know who the Sam is. But
yeah,
I enjoyed it. It was really good. So we'll have to do that.
yeah, sounds great.
All right.
All right, well, thanks very much again, Lance, and
All right.
yeah, we'll look forward to speaking again soon.
All right. Thank you too, Sam.
All right, cheers.